Something happens to women when they reach 40 and no one wants to talk about it. One day she's making breakfast for the kids, folding laundry, planning a family vacation. The next, she's downloading dating apps, buying lingerie, and texting a guy from the gym. And you're left wondering what the hell happened to your wife. It's happening everywhere. The tragedy doesn't begin with a scream. It begins with silence. A strange, cold, empty silence, as if something had broken inside her, but no one had warned. And when you realize it, it's too late. The woman who shared your bed, who raised children with you, who shared years of your life, is gone. Only her body remains. Her mind, her desire, her connection, they have evaporated. And no one prepared you for this. No one told you that at 40 she could stop being your wife without changing her address. While you thought the hardest part of marriage was the beginning, the bills, the diapers, the exhaustion, the real danger lurked beneath. Hidden beneath the automatic compliments, the routine dinners and family weekends. She still smiles in photos, she still calls you sweetheart. But inside her mind, something roars. A voice whispers, "You're disappearing, and no one misses you." This voice, fueled by cruel mirrors and relentless algorithms, plants doubt. Was it all worth it? Is there still time to truly live? At 20, she was the center of attention. At 30, she was admired. At 40, she begins to feel like she's become transparent. And herein lies the danger. Because when a woman feels she's no longer seen, she stops seeing too. She forgets the husband who stood by her side through the hardest times. She forgets the children who depend on her emotional stability. She forgets the memories that once made her smile. Everything is replaced by the obsession with being desired again. Not even loved, desired. As if that were proof of existence. As if, without it, she simply ceased to be real. The French writer Simone de Beauvoir said that a woman is not born, she becomes. But no one has talked about what happens when she feels herself becoming unbecoming. When the mirror no longer validates her. When men no longer notice her. When the gazes that shaped her for 2 decades turn to others. And this is where many men go wrong. They think that 15-year love is a shield against insecurity. They think stability is the prize. But for her, stability can feel like prison. And the more you insist on telling her she's beautiful, the more she feels you're lying. Or worse, that you're only saying it out of obligation. And then, like a hurricane without warning, she changes. First, subtly. A change in haircut, a new perfume, and "I need more space." Then, the phone always face down. The interest in reuniting with college friends. The vague dissatisfaction with everything you've built together. And you, still believing it's just a phase, don't realize you're about to be replaced. Not by someone better, richer, or more handsome, but by someone she believes can return her to the past. To the time when she felt alive. And this is where the story gets cruel. Because while she seeks adrenaline, you try to provide stability. While she wants explosion, you offer structure. While she feeds on likes and comments, you strive to keep the routine going. But the algorithm doesn't sleep. It delivers exactly what she wants to see. Women starting over at 42, leaving controlling husbands, finding freedom in the arms of strangers. Fabricated stories, a happy ending in 60 seconds. None of them show the loneliness of the next day. None of them reveal their children crying at night. None of them expose their irreversible trauma. This video isn't an attack, it's a warning. Not to all women, but to the reality no one has the courage to say out loud, that there's a silent, profound, and dangerous turning point halfway through. And that if you don't understand what's about to happen, you'll wake up one day to a message on your phone and an empty house. And you'll wonder where you went wrong. The answer? Maybe you never did. Maybe you were just the stable character in a story where the protagonist decided to reinvent herself, no matter the cost. She doesn't wake up one day and simply decide to destroy everything. That's not how it happens. The collapse is gradual, silent, like an internal crack that spreads without warning until the entire structure gives way. To the outside world, she remains the devoted mother, the gentle wife, the woman who stood by her side for 2 decades. But inside, what was once solid is now quicksand. And the most treacherous part of this transformation is that she herself doesn't fully understand what she's feeling. She only knows that something has changed, that something is gone. The name for this? Identity collapse. For much of her life, A woman builds her self-esteem based on a currency the world has always valued: beauty. And it's not her fault. Since childhood, she's been applauded when she looks pretty, noticed when she dresses up, praised when she's desirable. There's no such thing as character building on magazine covers. There's summer body, dream skin, how to look younger in 7 days. Beauty isn't just an advantage for the modern woman, it's the entire foundation of her identity. And like any foundation built on something temporary, it crumbles. When you turn 40, it doesn't just bring wrinkles or gray hairs. It brings panic. Not the panic of aging, that would be vanity. It's deeper. It's the panic of no longer being seen, of becoming invisible in a world that has always valued you for being desired. And it's at this moment that the female brain enters a state of emergency. The dopaminergic circuits, the same ones that cause pleasure when receiving a compliment, a like, a glance, are now in a state of exhaustion. What was once abundant has become scarce, and everything that is scarce becomes desperately valuable. This chemical shift isn't conjecture, it's neuroscience. At 40, the female brain's response to emotional stimuli drastically diminishes. Oxytocin, the hormone of bonding and affection, no longer has the same impact. Dopamine associated with reward and desire requires higher doses to take effect. This explains why a romantic dinner that was once sufficient is now perceived as boring. Why compliments from her husband no longer provoke a response. Why stability feels like boredom, and boredom like a threat. She's not bored with you. She's bored with her own perception of herself. And you, being part of the stable environment, become the mirror of what she wants to reject. This is where the invisible breakdown begins to manifest. She looks at old photos, not with pride, but with mourning. She starts talking more about the past, about travels, passions, about how alive she felt before the routine. And the tone is no longer nostalgic. It's wistful, yearning, almost regretful. And the more she relives this past version, the more she rejects the present you represent. The present in which she is no longer the star of her own story, but a supporting character in a narrative of obligations. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "We are the sum of our choices." But when a woman reaches 40 and realizes that all her choices revolved around being desired by others, and now that no longer exists, what's left? A woman with intense memories and a lukewarm reality. And the human brain is cruelly selective. It amplifies what it has lost and distorts what it still has. So even if her family is fine, even if you are present, even if home is a safe haven, none of that matters if she doesn't feel alive in her own skin. At this point, many men try to reclaim what was lost with romance. Flowers, trips, dinners, but all of this feels artificial to her. You're trying to light a fire with wet matches, because what's missing isn't gesture, it's identity. She doesn't want romance. She wants to reconnect with the version of herself that received longing glances when she entered a room. And you, with all your loyalty, predictability, and commitment, are the constant reminder that that version is dead. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said that youth is the season of infinite possibilities. For many women, turning 40 feels like being exiled from that season. And the exile isn't just aesthetic, it's psychological, it's spiritual. Because while men tend to enter middle age with a growing sense of value, wisdom, stability, experience, many women feel the opposite, a reversal of value. What once made them special is now a source of insecurity. What once made them unique is now replaceable. And that's where the crisis comes in. She no longer knows who she is. The wife, the mother, the professional, none of these identities trigger dopamine. They're all obligations. They're all predictable. None make her feel desired. So she seeks what Freud would call a transitional object, something or someone that functions as a symbolic escape. It could be a new look, a personal trainer, a coworker who hears better, or the Instagram profile of women who were reborn after divorce. All of this fuels a narrative that seems liberating, but it's just anesthetic. The emptiness persists, it's just been masked, and you meanwhile begin to sense something is wrong. But you can't put your finger on it. She doesn't fight. She doesn't complain. Sometimes she's even more affectionate. But it's a strange automatic affection, as if she's rehearsing the role of wife while rehearsing another one inside her own mind. The woman you know is being replaced, slowly. Not by another woman, but by a version of herself that only you don't recognize. The version that's tired of being a mother, tired of being predictable, tired of not feeling alive. This is the invisible collapse. It doesn't explode all at once, but it corrodes everything inside. And when it finally manifests itself on the outside, with betrayal, distancing, or emotional escape, you're already too fragile to react clearly. Because you spent years thinking that love was enough, that building a life together was enough, that your presence was a guarantee. But the truth is cruel. In a world where women have been conditioned to measure themselves by their desire, stability isn't a prize, it's a sentence. And if you think you can win back a 40-year-old woman with the same strategies you won over at 25, you're doomed to fail. Because she doesn't want what she wanted before. She wants the impossible, to feel what she felt again, when she was a different person. And you, no matter how hard you try, can never give that back to her. Because what she lost isn't in you, it's inside her. And that's what they never told you, that modern marriage doesn't end with an argument. It ends with a slow disconnect, chemical, neurological, existential. And when that kind of breakup happens, what comes next is even more dangerous. She's not looking for a man, she's looking for a feeling, a chemistry, a return to the inner tides that once made her feel alive, desired, irreplaceable. And that feeling has a scientific name, dopamine, the hormone of pleasure, risk, and anticipation. Only, unlike in her 20s, now she needs much more stimulation to feel the same effect. It's not about love, it's not about a lack of affection, it's about addiction. Addiction to validation. While you offer stability, regular dinners, weekends with the kids, predictable compliments, the outside world offers adrenaline. Likes, comments from strangers, a man's casual glance in the elevator. And every small gesture lights a chemical fuse in her that you, no matter how devoted you are, can no longer ignite. Not because of your fault, but because your touch isn't new. And in the dopamine-addicted brain, novelty is everything. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky explained this brilliantly. Dopamine doesn't respond to the reward itself, but to the expectation of the reward. In other words, what causes the chemical spike isn't the kiss itself, it's the uncertainty of when it will come. It's not the compliment, it's the suspense of who will do it. The female brain at 40 is desperately seeking this expectation of reward because it long ago ceased to exist within marriage. Predictability killed the effect. And like any addiction, the body begins to crave higher doses, bolder, riskier. Does she know this? Not rationally, but she feels it. She feels the need for something new. Something that makes her heart race, that breaks the routine, that takes her off autopilot. And here comes what few men understand. She doesn't want to cheat. She wants to feel alive. Cheating, physical or emotional, is just the symptom. The real trigger is the lack of stimulation. And the problem is that, for many women, arousal is directly linked to being perceived as desirable by men who have no obligation to desire her. Evolutionary psychologist David Buss describes this as sexual market value. At 25, she was a hot asset. At 40, she feels like she's being taken off the shelf. Not because she's ugly, but because she's no longer a novelty. And worst of all, she still remembers exactly what it was like to be the center of attention. The contrast between past and present is what destroys her. She doesn't want to compete with 20-year-olds. She wants to know if she can still beat them, and if a single message from a younger, bolder, more unpretentious man proves that she can, that she still has power, she's lost. And herein lies the cruelest trap. Your attention, as a husband, is considered an obligation. His, as a stranger, is considered a choice. You tell her she's beautiful, and she thinks, he only says that because he loves me. The stranger on Instagram comments with a fire emoji on her photo, and she thinks, he doesn't even know me and he finds me irresistible. Is that irrational? Absolutely. But it's also irresistible. And the human brain was never programmed to handle infinite dopamine. The problem is, now she has a smartphone and an entire network of 24/7 validation, and a partner who can no longer compete with this addiction. Worse, she still finds social support to fuel this behavior. You deserve to be happy. Follow your heart. Don't settle for less than butterflies in your stomach. None of these phrases have any basis in reality, but they all serve as fuel for the narrative she constructs to justify her actions. After all, if the world says all of this is empowerment, how could it be selfish? How could it be betrayal? The philosopher Pascal said, "The heart has reasons that reason knows nothing of." But today, the female heart has algorithms that reason can't compete with. The endless scrolling, the stories of perfect couples, the friends who turn things around after leaving their husbands, it all reinforces the idea that feeling good now is worth more than maintaining a life built over decades. The dopamine that once came from intimacy, from complicity, now comes from exposure, from vanity fueled by likes and comments. And in this chemical war, you're the only one playing unarmed. Many men make the fatal mistake of trying to improve themselves to win her back. They work out more, buy gifts, plan surprises. But they don't understand that the competition now isn't between you and another man. It's between you and the addiction. Between you and a chemical feeling she can barely name. You're not competing with the personal trainer, the coworker, or the high school ex. You're competing with how these men make her feel, even if only for a few seconds. And here lies a brutal contradiction. The same hormonal system that made her fall in love with you at 25 now makes her push you away at 40. The comfort that once felt like security is now a prison. The constancy that once felt like affection is now boredom. And no matter how hard you try to rekindle the flame, it only ignites when there's risk, when there's uncertainty, when there's fantasy. That's why even women with solid marriages, present husbands, and healthy children fall into this trap. Because validation addiction is silent, socially accepted, and devastating. When she starts living by sensation and not reality, everything becomes an object of exchange. Love becomes boredom, family becomes routine, you become the problem. But here's the cruelest point of all. She believes she's finding herself again. That she's discovering her truth, that she's following her intuition. When, in reality, she's just becoming a slave to her own chemistry. A late adolescent trapped in an adult body. It's not evolution, it's regression. And when regression reaches its peak, the next step is inevitable. Reinterpreting the past. She needs to rewrite history to justify the breakdown. I was never happy. He was always controlling. We were just living in illusion. No matter how many smiling photos, how many love letters, how many happy anniversaries you've shared, everything will be discarded. Because admitting that you destroyed something real with a chemical surge is unbearable. You have to create a narrative, a new plot. And you, inevitably, will be the villain. She's not being evil, she's being human, deeply human. But in her humanity, she's being impulsive, fragile, and self-destructive. And you, by loving, by being constant, by representing what she herself has built, become the mirror she needs to break to move forward. Dopamine is treacherous. The desire for validation is a silent addiction. And the culture that romanticizes emotional escape disguised as self-discovery is the trigger. But the worst is yet to come. Because when the chemistry wears off and the addiction no longer sustains the fantasy, she wakes up in a field of ruins. And then comes what we call the emotional hangover. The moment when a woman realizes she destroyed a castle because of a spark. And the most perverse? Sometimes that spark wasn't even real. Freedom sold as a prize is often the sentence that follows destruction. And the woman who once swore to protect everything she built now dances alone on the rubble of her own home, believing that this minefield is in fact a new beginning. But there's a part of this story that rarely makes it to the stage. What happens to children when their mother trades stability for validation? When the home that formed them becomes a silent battlefield, where there are no explosions, but psychological noises that will follow them for decades? Philosopher Nassim Taleb defines fragility as the inability to endure chaos. And children, however adaptable they may seem, are fragile. They read the world through their parents. When one of them implodes emotionally, the entire universe loses its structure. No matter how many sweet words she uses to explain her search for happiness, children feel abandoned. They don't understand self-knowledge. They understand absence, lack, silence, closed doors. And no matter how much the mother repeats that everything will be fine, the child's body registers the instability, and this trauma is stored. How many children grow up with the impression that love is volatile? What relationships fall apart when the other no longer makes us happy? How many teenagers will repeat the cycle of selfishness disguised as authenticity because they saw destruction celebrated as courage at home? This is the invisible legacy of an emotional crisis masquerading as liberation. The woman who abandons her family in search of herself doesn't realize she's leaving behind children who will spend years trying to understand why her rediscovery of her own essence required the collapse of everything that sustained them. And to justify this, the second side effect emerges: narrative manipulation. The woman who once smiled on birthdays, thanked others in travel videos, and wrote "my everything" in couples captions now has to rewrite the entire story to make her current decisions seem logical. This is where the ex-husband becomes abusive. That happy moments become fake. That marriage becomes a prison, and she becomes a survivor who finally found the courage to escape. And this narrative isn't constructed for you, it's constructed for herself. Because admitting she destroyed herself impulsively is unbearable. She needs to believe that everything was always wrong, and the more intense the emotional disconnect, the more brutal the rewriting of the past will be. The woman who built a relationship with you for 20 years now looks back and sees mistakes that never even existed. Banal episodes become traumas. Normal arguments become psychological oppression, and you, who held the fort, who protected the home, who paid for her silences, find yourself portrayed as the obstacle to her happiness. Because, in the plot she must sustain, you can't be the victim. You need to be the villain. Only then can she remain the heroine of her own narrative. And the children, they listen, they absorb, even if silently, even if without understanding. They grow up with distorted versions of reality. They learn to doubt their memories. They are taught to distrust what they felt. Narrative manipulation doesn't just destroy the past, it contaminates the future. Children raised under the logic that the truth is what hurts the least for the one who destroys grow up insecure, incapable of trust, and they carry into their own relationships the uncertainty about what is real love and what is emotional delirium. But the ultimate irony is yet to come: the hangover of freedom. The woman who once smiled, saying "I'm finally living," wakes up months later in an emptiness that even she can't explain. Her new partner doesn't have the same patience. Her children begin to distance themselves. Friendships based on complaints become repetitive, and she slowly realizes that she hasn't rebuilt a new life, she's only destroyed the old one. And now, she must live with the rubble. The cruelest moment comes in silence. On the Christmas the children choose to spend with their father. On the birthday where there are no sincere gifts. On the Sunday when the new boyfriend doesn't show up. The woman who destroyed everything in a fit of excitement now finds herself surrounded by an echo. An echo of decisions that seemed liberating but were merely disguises for the denial of an inevitable reality. Time passes. Youth fades, and no selfie or Instagram message can reverse this cycle. The ultimate tragedy is that many realize their mistake, but they realize it too late. They try to return, to reconnect with their children, to rewrite the narrative again, this time as the woman who learned from her mistakes. But trust, once broken, doesn't return with words. It returns with time. And in many cases, time has already passed. She looks back and sees that she traded a devoted partner for a fantasy. That she traded the real warmth of a family for digital compliments. That she traded the eternal for the momentary. And in this moment of clarity comes the quietest collapse of all. Her self-image crumbles. The woman who thought she was on the rise realizes she was merely running away. Running away from herself. Running away from the mirror. Running away from time. And you, the man who was left behind, need to understand one thing with brutal clarity. It wasn't you. It never was. You were the reflection of what she didn't want to accept. The mirror of the reality she tried to destroy. The anchor of stability that, in a fit of rage, she called a prison. And as much as it hurts, your pain is proof that you haven't abandoned what you've built. She has. She looks back and sees that she traded a devoted partner for a fantasy, that she traded the real warmth of a family for digital compliments, that she traded the eternal for the momentary. And in this moment of clarity comes the quietest collapse of all. Her self-image crumbles. The woman who thought she was on the rise realizes she was merely running away. Running away from herself, running away from the mirror, running away from time. And you, the man who was left behind, need to understand one thing with brutal clarity. It wasn't you. It never was. You were the reflection of what she didn't want to accept. The mirror of reality she tried to destroy. The anchor of stability that, in a fit of rage, she called a prison. And as much as it hurts, your pain is proof that you haven't abandoned what you built. She has. And here comes the point no one talks about. While she sought attention outside herself, you were trained to seek nothing. While validation fueled her crisis, you believed loyalty was enough. But the game was never fair. And if you don't understand the rules of modern seduction, you'll be discarded by those you least expect. There's a stark difference between being the man she's built a life with and the man who can still spark desire in 60 seconds. This difference isn't about beauty, money, or youth. It's about strategy, and it's in the content that few have the courage to explore. The Forbidden Manual is what men should be taught from the start. A direct, raw, and scientific guide on how to trigger the psychological mechanisms that generate genuine attraction, and not just be the emotional support for a woman in crisis. You can continue to be predictable, ignored, betrayed, and cheated on. Or you can understand how to become a man impossible to ignore. Access is now available. Includes the full audiobook and 3 strategic bonuses that delve deeper into everything revealed here. The truth is simple. Either you learn how to become the trigger, or you'll always be the target.